Tell me, what was that like to grow up in Cuba in the 50s, 60s?
You know, my dad figured whatever you want to do in life, I'm going to teach you what I know, just in case when you go to medical school, you can play drums on the weekend and make some money. I was just playing for fun, percussion. And when I told him I wanted to study drum set. He put me on a practice pad with a metronome. And I was telling him, are you sure this is what Ringo and Charlie Watts did? And he goes, I don't care what they did, but this is what you have to do. So I gave him that. At the same time, my dad was teaching me. But Alex, I remember, would come in and play. Instead of me just watching him, he would say, play, play, play. And I would take like 3 congas and play. And then my hands were falling. After like 25 minutes, he would go, you solo. From Indonesia. I mean, it's just like amazing, the amounts of instruments of the world and their rhythms that exist, that you can have 5 lifetimes of grooves. So as a drummer, that's what I do. You know, I collect rhythms.
I love that.
It's all drum and dance. That's why when you come from that, and the thing that I love, it's all about how can I, with my drum set and my percussion, make this music, this song, feel good and move these people.
Very good point. I totally like that.
So basically you have... So basically Bembé, it's almost like in Cuba, it's used more like a, are you going to the Bembé? You know, Bembé meaning like the jam session. So now it doesn't have to be spiritual. Beautiful, beautiful. So you went there for a little bit to a 16-note feel, but never changed the clave. And he came and whispered something to the guy like this, you know. And I go, man, I got this video of you doing this solo, and Changuito whispered something to your ear. And go, what did he say? He said, hay que practicar. You gotta practice.
Hello, everyone. Can you tell us or show us whether you can hear us and see us? Maybe thumbs up. It sounds like you can see us and hear us, which is great. I'm very excited for this meeting. I'm still letting everybody in. We're very excited to have Walfredo here with us and Claus. Make sure to stay till the end because we've got something special for you. Other than that, let's just have some fun. I'm really looking to this conversation, and Claus and Walfredo, please take it from here, and let's go with the flow.
Yes, going with the flow. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm beyond excited to have Walfredo on this meeting here, and to just give you a little introduction to our mutual past, if you will. I remember a drum camp in Germany where we both were on the bill, and I was super impressed with your knowledge, Wally, and I mean all the tips that you had for the students and your style of communication and your attitude, how every student was important to you, and I just loved that. And in case you don't know it, Wally you're coming from a very musical and artistic family, right? So your father was or still is a very influential drummer, percussionist who has literally taught, I mean, all the leading percussionists in the style of Afro-Cuban music, I would even say. And he has worked with zillions of the greats out there, from Louis Bellson to Cachao to Josephine Baker. And also you have a brother who plays percussion, I think, and a brother who is an actor. Am I right?
Yes.
And so you grew up in a very artistic musical family. So tell me, what was that like to grow up in Cuba in the 50s, 60s, and and be in that environment? How do I imagine that?
Well, I was very blessed, and thank you for all the compliments. My middle brother plays with Zac Brown Band, and unfortunately my younger brother, which is now on TV on a movie called Daredevil, the series, The Daredevil, that was the last role because he died of cancer 2 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was really a big hit. He was my youngest brother. He was a great actor, soap opera actor, and we all played. My dad figured, whatever you want to do in life, I'm gonna teach you what I know, just in case. He told me, just in case when you go to medical school, you can play drums on the weekend and make some money.
That's awesome. Okay.
Excuse me. I'm just getting off bronchitis.
Yeah.
So I spent the last week in Las Vegas with Chicago with bronchitis, medicating myself, because that's a whole other subject. When the drummer gets sick, you gotta play, and there's no you gotta just make it happen. But yes, when I was growing up, my dad was a jazz fan. He played everything, not just Latin. He played shows. He studied drum set with Henry Adler in New York.
I know.
And he was raised in New York City until he was 18. Then he moved to Cuba, back to Cuba. So he arrived recording in the studios, commercials, shows at night. And then when I was 5, we left Cuba, and then we moved to Puerto Rico. And Cuba closed down because of the situation, the revolution, and no relations with the United States. So in Puerto Rico, my dad was the house band percussionist for all the shows that came in. Liza Minnelli, Sammy Davis, Paul Anka, Bobby Vinton, the 60s, the Temptations, Diana Ross. And he used to take me when I was a kid to see these shows. I thought it was really cool. And but even though I wanted to become a veterinarian,
you did?
An animal doctor.
Okay.
I was already a musician and a percussionist, just playing for fun. I was just playing for fun, percussion. And when I told him I wanted to study drum set. He put me on a practice pad with a metronome, the Cozy Cole. Actually, the other day I just saw the book. I think it was Henry Adler, Kessler. I'm sorry, William Kessler book, and rudiments, reading. And I was telling him, "Are you sure this is what Ringo and Charlie Watts did?" And he goes, "I don't care what they did, but this is what you have to do." So I gave him that. And then at that time, we moved to Las Vegas. I was in the 9th grade. I was like, probably like 13 years old. And from there on, I realized to play percussion and be good, and to play drums and be good, one day and one night was not enough. So I had to quit all my sports, the high school activities, going to the movie and hanging out with the guys and the girls. It's a sacrifice. So I did. I became obsessed with drum set and percussion, not only technically, but playing with people and jamming and studying the history of each instrument. Where is it Brazilian? Is it African? Is it Dominican? Where does it come from? And so I haven't stopped. So I started working really early. When I was 16 years old, I was already playing the shows in Las Vegas. My dad put me in the Musicians Union, signed me up. So, it was always in my house, my mom with the Latin music, my dad with his jazz records, and me with the rock and roll in the room. And I tell people that sometimes when I went to the bathroom and I heard the Latin music and my dad playing Miles Davis and Tony Williams and me playing the Guess Who and Cream and Jimi Hendrix, it was like, whoa,
okay,
this is something else. And that's kind of like a fusion before fusion. It was like that sounds cool. Jimi Hendrix with Miles Davis taking a solo on trumpet with congas and bongos and salsa. So, I grew up with all of it, and I kind of became that.
Okay.
So that's my quick story.
Very cool, and I think there's tons of more of interesting things that we're going to dive into at some later point. Now, one of the reasons why I was so excited about having you on this little drum talk is that you are one of these members of that rare breed of percussionists who also play drums. And so, I mean, if someone asked me, Wally, is he a percussionist or is he rather a drummer? I would say he's absolutely both. And there are not too many people who have that quality. I mean, the only name that still possibly comes to my mind would be like Alex Acuna, but other than that, you have drum set players who know a lot about Latin music, or you have percussionists who know a lot about Latin music, but being at home in both areas is kind of a rare thing. Did you always try to be that, or did it naturally evolve into being at home in both fields, drums and percussion? How was that for you?
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned Alex, because Alex and my father, also Don Elias, was a lot of influence, and they were teachers. So Alex was living in Puerto Rico. When Alex arrived in Puerto Rico, he was 18 years old, very young. My dad was older. So my dad was a mentor to Alex. And Alex, even though he played percussion, cajon, conga, and everything, he loved jazz. So when we moved to Las Vegas, about a year later, Alex moved to Las Vegas. And he was living in an apartment with his wife, and Lynette was his daughter, and twins were little babies. And he couldn't practice, so he asked my dad if he could set up a drum set in our studio garage, so which was full of drums. So Alex set up, I remember his clear fives drums like Billy Cobham, and he had 2K cymbals like this, like Tony Williams, Elvin Jones. And while I was listening to Sly and the Family Stone, at that time Chameleon had come out, Herbie Hancock, and a lot of fusion was going on. Billy Cobham with Mahavishnu. Alex was turning me on to Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, Rashid Ali, Roy Haynes, and all these jazz combo drummers. At the same time, my dad was teaching me, but Alex, I remember, would come in and play on the drum set and tell me, instead of me just watching him, he would say, play. And I would take like 3 congas and play, like a beat. Anything I wanted. And he play on top of me and then improvise. And then my hands were falling. After like 25 minutes, he would go, you solo. And I would go like, I remember bleeding. I mean, I had like my hands. And, at that particular time, he got the gig with Miroslav Vitus and then to Weather Report. So I became fascinated with Weather Report, and I would go to check him out at the sound checks with Jaco on bass, Manolo on percussion. So for me, there was never a division between drum set and percussion. Because when you define percussion, even piano is classified as a percussion instrument. Everything you strike with your hand or strike with a stick, a mallet, a brush, whatever, is percussion. So Airto was another influence. At that time, I was going to junkyards, toy stores, music shops. Everything that sounded good, I collected.
Wow.
Not only Latin percussion, Brazilian percussion, African drumming, and then mixing it, because a beat is a beat. You can have a drum set beat, but you can have and if something else sounds good, a couch, your closet, whatever, you know. So like, so I consider myself a rhythmicist, a groove collector, and whatever sounds great for the song, I'll try. If somebody wants something else, for example, with Chicago, Robert Lamb, we were recording a few years ago, and he wanted percussion, and he called me. He goes, Wally, I want you to put percussion on this, but can you put some instruments that I've never heard ever? So bongos is not. Timbales, have you heard timbales? Yeah. Have you heard conga drums? Yeah. Have you heard guiro? Yeah. Chequere? Yeah. What? So I started collecting sounds and samples, and because you cannot collect it all in one room. I mean, trash cans and gongs and big drums. So the big stuff I sample, the little stuff I collect. And so always trying to give fresh sounds. However, the rhythms can be very old. It can be old African rhythms, Chinese, India. Those are the three fountains of the world that started with a lot of percussion complexities, and then they traveled. You know, Africa traveled north, and then they came to Spain and Europe, and India went also west, and in China spread over. Because I've been to China, and I've never been to India, but I study, and the amount of percussion and rhythms that are so deep that still haven't arrived to the pop scene.
Yeah.
From Indonesia, I mean, it's just like amazing, the amounts of instruments of the world and their rhythms that exist, that you can have 5 lifetimes of grooves. So as a drummer, that's what I do. You know, I collect rhythms.
I love that. And now, some minutes ago, you mentioned it's not just that you study these drums and their patterns. It's also you study the history behind it, and you need to know where the rhythms come from, what they have been used for, and what's the origin of a certain style of drumming. And I think. And I mean, I very much relate to that, because I also totally dig that whole approach of really knowing where certain things are coming from. And like saying, when I remember my first times when I took some lessons with percussionists, I wanted to know more about the backgrounds. And at the same time, I was kind of afraid of making possibly stupid mistakes, because I'm maybe doing some things that I'm not supposed to do, but I just know the full story behind it. So what I'm trying to communicate here is especially the whole family of Afro-Cuban rhythms, I mean, comes with, I mean, just that category alone comes with a wealth of interesting background and history to it. And with Open-Minded Drumming, we have produced a course which is about Bembé and Afro-Cuban 6/8 rhythms. And I still remember how we tried to come up with a name for that. And I said, well, it's some sort of it's the Big Bang of Latin drumming. It's where a lot of things came from and where they evolved from. And I mean, this whole world of 6/8 rhythms, if it's based out of the Santeria or Abacua or Palo or Arara and all of these, I mean, there's a history and a science to all of that. So I'd be super curious if you watched the course and you would say, huh, that's possibly not what it's supposed to be. I hope not, but I'd be super interested in how did you study, especially those 6/8 related rhythms, and like did you study Bata with your father, or how is that, or what's your take on all of these super traditional 6/8 things which are happening?
Well, you know, it's a complex thing to explain. I'm always trying to bring it more to a simplicity situation. For example, you might be a keyboard player that plays on a top 40 band and play Fender Rhodes and clavinet, has all this stuff. But you can say, I came from church and I used to play the pipe organ at the church and the choir, or not. Yeah, I don't play pipe organ. I just play the Fender Rhodes and all that. Or you can do both. A lot of the music of the world comes from spiritual. So there's like spiritual, the whole world has, in all religions of the world, including you go to the, I had an experience one time that I was, and I'll tell you this quick little story. So I was in a sound check in Venice, Italy, with Steve Winwood, and there was this group of Israeli musicians that were going to come in after us with a guitar, a bass, and a percussionist, and I was going to go to eat. It was dinner time, so I was walking to eat, and I heard this, and I heard like Billy Cobham all of a sudden on the drums, and I went like, where did that happen? There was no drums. And I'm going like, what is that? So I turned around and I saw these three guys on stage. And this guy had a little drum and with a microphone, and it was like drum and bass and all that stuff. And I'm going, what is that? So like I turn around and I miss dinner because I love music more than food. And I skipped dinner and went back, and on the side stage, this guy was playing a little drum, and it's called, I believe, the Toph Medium. And the Toph Medium is the drum of Miriam. It's a biblical, Miriam from the Bible. That means it's a biblical drum. So they used to say, it's in the Bible, praise God with your horns and your jingle, the tambourines. Tambourines meaning frame drums. It's not just like that. Frame drums, you got to learn how to play those drums. And this little drum, this guy used to play with artist called Ofra Hassa. And he was playing this little drum and had I believe had a jingle, a couple of jingles. And I looked at it, it's almost like the Ganjira from India. You have a little drum like this that sounds like a drum set. And so you have to master this drum. But the point is, it was a spiritual drum back then, but now we're in a jazz festival. So that's what happened with Afro-Cuban music. Bata drums, abakwa was something else. It's not Bata, it's not Yoruba. Remember that a lot of slaves came to the New World from different parts of Africa. So you have Mali region, you have Nigeria, Benin, that's Yoruba. So that's like the Bata drum.
Which is...
and then you have Congo.
Which is Santeria, where you worship the Orishas. But Abakwa, then again, is something else, right?
Yes. So the Santeria is a religion that it was for survival. The African religion, the African slaves, adopted Catholicism with all the saints. And then kind of like, okay, so Saint Lazarus, which is your saint for healing and the sick and all that, is perfect. Babaluaye is the Yoruba Orisha for the sick and the healing. Then you have Yemaya, which is the deity of water and the ocean and the rains. So you pray for Yemaya for rains for your crops, you know, and then you have different Orishas like the Catholicism have La Virgen de Guadalupe and Saint Lazarus and Saint Mary and Saint this and Saint that, and everybody's a saint, you know. But instead of praying for Saint Lazarus, the Africans would basically play for Babaluaye with a Saint Lazarus saint. That's what it's called, Santeria, sainthood, Santeria. And they would practice their religion, and the drum, the colonials were going, they're such good Catholics. Look at that. They're praying and they're playing and dancing for Saint Lazarus and Saint Mary
Santa Barbara,
all that stuff.
Yeah.
So Santa Barbara. So the rhythms survived, and 50s and 60s, you couldn't even see that. You could hear it even if you were living in Cuba, because you were not participant, and so and on the pop side, you had conga, bongo, timbales that came out of Timpani for popular music, dancing music. But a lot of those rhythms that were foundation rhythms started transferring out with the microphones and the recordings, and people started listening. And even though I personally don't practice Santeria, I learned and I wanted to learn. It's all drum and dance. That's why when you come from that, and the thing that I love is that the more the groove is happening, the better the people dance. And I take that to the drum set. So when I'm playing with Chicago, in fact, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine about doing a drum solo in tempo in front of a crowd. The bottom line is, let's not concentrate too much on the technique. Have fun and make them dance. So whatever rudiment is it that you have to do, whatever technique that you call it, the final thing is it grooving enough? Because in our world, we are doing this podcast, you're studying, I'm studying, we are all studying technique, drums, tuning, everything for one thing. We're in the moving business. And we're in the moving business because what we do, we are creating something and mastering something to make the people move out of their seats mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. If you play a love ballad, move them. Make them cry. If you're having a party dance band and they're dancing and going crazy, they're sweating, you're moving. You are in the moving business. That's the ultimate. So we're learning all of this, whether you're in church or spiritual, or you're doing a gospel tune or a recording or whatever you're doing. It's all about how can I, with my drum set and my percussion, make this music, this song, feel good and move these people.
Very good point. I totally like that. And I also think that this whole background of in that case, Afro-Cuban music with strong roots in Africa is something that possibly has the power to have you develop yet some other skills and a different set of tools for your instrument. Like I remember, for instance, taking lessons with a percussionist by the name of a guy by the name of Bill Summers, that I'm sure you know, right? So yes. Bill, I think, was the first person ever that I really saw perform bata drums, and I remember his wife was dancing for it, and they would even teach people in the class some lyrics, some African lyrics about these calls for the orishas, and still when you would hear Bill Summers play with Herbie Hancock and Headhunters, you wouldn't hear necessarily bata drums, but you would hear a crazy cool percussion part that kind of was a statement in itself. But I think a lot of that came out of his ability to really understand very traditional Afro-Cuban music. Yeah.
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, all of you might know Herbie Hancock first album, Watermelon Man introduction, right? So Bill, that knew the rhythms of bata drums, which are fascinating, which, for example, that, I don't know if you remember the beginning, doody, 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 boodity, boodity, yaba. That's a rhythm for Babalu Aye, and originally is kumpa, 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 kumpa. The other drum, kumpa, kum, kumpa, kum, kumpa, kum, kumpa, kum, taba, and then the iya of setting. So that rhythm, so that's the beautiful thing that Bill Summers did, that I have done many times. For example, you can actually, rhythm is rhythm. Now, where you put it is something else. For example, we're talking about it a little before. When people goes, they're all talking about shuffles and 6/8. What is a shuffle? Well, if you actually take a shuffle, is it ta 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 tu ta or Bernard Purdy shuffle or Rosanna, that ghost note. And he accents the 2 and 4, but the beat is chinka chicka 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 da go da da. What is that? Rana Rosanna So before the word shuffle ever was said, or Columbus discovered America or whatever, there was what I'm saying? So and there was always, and there's also so 16 notes and triplets fit in there. Triplets and 16 notes. So that is basically Afro music. African music is usually very polyrhythmically complex, but there's no separation like the 6/8 rhythms and the 16 note rhythms. They're all meshed in there. You have like a taka kataka, like rumba Colombia. It's like taka kataka kataka tara katara katara kataka tara, and the drums are going kiki koko kiki koko kiki koko kiki koko ta kiki koko. That's 6/8 against 16 notes and. You know what I'm saying? So basically, you have. But you can actually do in the same tempo.
Very cool.
So that's a combination of go from one to the other, and sometimes you can actually be on a 16 notes and play triplets against the 16 notes, and sometimes vice versa. You can be on a 6/8 and put 16 notes against a 6/8 combination. So they're all intertwined in there. And so that's one good reason to study African music and Afro-Cuban music, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Venezuelan, Colombia, because this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand. For example, right now we have a rhythm that I hear all the time, but a long time ago when I was a kid, it's a Bantu rhythm actually from Benin area, which is Yoruba, Benin, Nigeria rhythm. And then you have they're like. So in Martinique, they say is souk, French Caribbean. In Puerto Rico, they say, well, that's part of the bomba rhythm. We call it reggaeton right now. Everything is, now you put it in the machines. In root is an African rhythm, is a Bantu rhythm that is included in the folkloric music over there. And you got and they have it in Brazil, they have it in Colombia, they have it in Venezuela. So of course they do, because it came. So right now somebody for the first time brings a plate of pasta and meatballs. Oh, Maltaschen. I remember that really well. German Maltaschen, the raviolis from Germany. And then all of a sudden, I come in and I cook Maltaschen, and I put my own thing, and I put maybe some hot sauce, this and that, and I call it Wally World Ravioli. And it's a hit. And I'm famous. And everybody in the world goes, that's a Wally World Ravioli. But is it? Is it? Before I was born, you guys were cooking Maltaschen. So basically, with music and rhythm, it's the same thing. So me personally, I do not want to buy ever a drum and not know where is it come from, what has it been used. For example, when I was in Ireland, I studied the bow drum.
Frame drum.
The bow drum. That originally, there's a lot of different, but you know, remember that Spain was 700 years Moorish with frame drums and drums. And when the Isabella and Ferdinand united and crushed the Moors and expelled the Moors, even the music changed. Guitar became more rhythmical because no more drums. Oh no, we're not going to have Moorish drums anymore. We're Catholic now. So the castanets and the flamenco started with the tacon, the feet. Where's the drums? Oh, we have to create the rhythms now. The same thing, that those frame drums travel all the way to Ireland. And so when you see those drums being played, and then you have similarities in North Africa, and the carcaboose from Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria, and you go, that's like castanets. Well, it's the other way around.
There's a crazy amount of interaction between all these cultural spheres and how one thing influences the other, and but it's always worth diving deep into the very foundation of where things came from first. Now, with I'm trying to circulate back to this Bembé course. Now, in the first place, Bembé, for those who don't know, maybe in the audience here, is usually referred to as some kind of a key bell pattern, right? And
well, you know, Bembé used to be, the word has
meanings, right?
Being used now. They call it Bembé, maybe 6/8 patterns related, because that's what it was used to play more in the spiritual gatherings. So basically, Bembé is almost like in Cuba, it's used more like are you going to the Bembé? You know, Bembé meaning like the jam session. So now it doesn't have to be spiritual or a spiritual gathering with bata drums playing 6/8. So because of that, it kind of got like a Bembé rhythm, meaning a 6/8. But Bembé is basically like a gathering of spiritual. It's almost like a mass or a service. Are you going to the service tonight? So you're going to go to the service. So what is the service? Oh, we pray and we dance, and there's going to be guitars and drums and an organ. And that's like what you call, you know, the service, and different places they call it. It's the same thing happened in India. You know, there's the spiritual tablas with the sitar, and then that flows, some rhythms have flown into modern pop culture that used to be only spiritual. So the same thing has happened in Cuba, where I remember when, I forgot, was the percussionist that put bata drums on a Herbie Hancock tune. A lot of people thought it was sacrilegious. Those drums should never leave the house. Those drums, what are those drums doing in the studio? You know, some people are more traditional, you know, and want things to stay the same. And unfortunately, we as humans, the instruments, technology, music, it's always in evolution and change. So like what happened is, now the bata drums is sold at LP catalog, but in the 1950s, you never saw what a bata drum was unless you would go to these places to see it played. And so what happened is, right now you say, oh yeah, Bembé tonight, Bembé at 6. So it might be spiritual. It might be like we're gonna do a Bembé for Chango or a Bembé for a saint. You know, so, and then sometimes sometimes you might have a birthday party and it might be half spiritual, and then you cook for the people and the invited guests. And there was always going to be rhythm, dancing, singing, having a good time, celebrating life. And so so it varies, but usually a Bembé is connected to the 6/8 rhythms that are played in the Bembé. So, and the thing about this clave, you know, like it can be on a bata. There's clave played or not played, and it's like a and you can actually have palomonte, so 6/8. You know, you can put clave in a reggae tune, which has the repica drums, as you know, has foundation and African. So sometimes you see that. So, you know, clave is like the foundation. Sometimes it's played, sometimes it's there, sure, but not played. And sometimes the clave melody can change to the other side of the beat. So it can start like a and then, you know, the accent will be like on the 3. Absolutely. On the other side, yeah, which is what they call 2/3.
And I mean, making this connection between this and is also something that that I was trying to focus on in the course that we're putting up now, and kind of trying to come up with different, let's say, levels of sort of imitating what different drums could do. Like imagine you had this.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So you went there for a little bit to a 16-note feel, but never changed the clave. So the clave is like the center, and it can be, you know, but this hand is changing, not this. So basically, if you put a metronome, you can play the clave. You can do what you do in the polyrhythm changes the feel, and it's beautiful because what you're doing right there, and this is something that is interesting. I'm old enough to where there were budgets long time ago. I saw bands that were like 6 percussionists, piano and bass. And the budgets started shrinking, and that started happening in Africa, where I see now drum set and 1 talking drums instead of 5 percussionists, because the drum set became a culmination of percussion ensemble world music in one. As you remember, it started with the symphonic bass drum, military snare drum, Turkish cymbals, Chinese tom-toms. So, you know, it's a world music conglomeration into one. And when he was still in New Orleans and they were playing jazz, but these drummers, instead of playing on the snare drum, started including different things to color their groove, which is exactly what you're doing there. So instead of having 4 guys, now the other thing is really important also. So now if you have 3 percussionists, sometimes you cannot play like you play because you got to make space for the other guys. So for example, I tell that to my students. Why did I sound so good in my practicing room and then I went to play with the band? Because now you have to share space. In your room, like right now, I'm alone here. There's nobody here. And whatever I play, I'm not sharing space. But when the three percussionists come in, now we have to split up the parts to make it sound good. And it's ingredients. That's why I compare to food all the time. If we're gonna make pasta and I bring the pasta, don't bring the pasta. I'm doing that. You bring what? The meatballs? Somebody else brings the tomato sauce, and somebody else brings the Parmesan cheese. But if I bring the pasta, you bring the pasta, and he brings the pasta, we don't have a dish that feels good. So you have to know the rhythm. That's why in this app, even though you might not play percussion, when you hear the rhythm and you actually go, oh, this is the high, this is the medium, this is the low. So right now, for example, you can play the clave on a wood block or on the cowbell. And instead of playing the tom-toms and the snare, it can be an ethnic drum. So sometimes the sound can create something new or old. Jeff Porcaro used to have a thing that one time in a conversation, he said, I think there's two ways of playing stuff. Go, yeah? Go, yeah. Traditional or kind of like a. And I said, like, kind of like a samba, kind of like a Afro-Cuban, kind of like a, and he used to do that a lot. For example, like when he used to play beats like Rosanna, the shuffle. But if you take the right hand and put it on this, and then you play the snare part on a bongo. You know what I'm saying? So now you got dun. That's what the left hand is doing, and then and instead of the bass drum, it can be a jun from Africa. So those rhythms already existed, but what I call the transferring from an ethnic rhythm to the drum set. And a lot of drummers have done that. Steve Gadd did it with the samba, with the cymbal thing.
Yeah.
With the 2 and 4 on the tom-tom, like a surdo, triangles.
And you have been mentioning Jun drums. I remember learning a pattern with a friend of mine from Africa who taught me this, and I had to learn this.
That is beautiful.
Until I noticed, it's fives all the way through. It's like it's as if today you hear Annika Nilles play. So it's just one more of these examples where you find the overlaps from different spheres, and this is also, something that I was trying to some kind of common thread that I was trying to weave into this course with Bembé, that understanding all of these traditions is a cool thing. You don't have to show everybody you know it, but it will do something with your playing. It will expand your understanding of rhythms, and it shows you're responsible about all these traditions and the history behind it. And I just totally love that idea, and that was a major driving force in the creation of that course. Yeah, I should say. I'm tapping my own shoulder, but
I agree, and And it's beautiful, and I love, it's something that we do in Cuban drumming, Brazilian, African, where you muffle the big tom-tom that you were playing, because like and you know, one tom-tom doesn't mean that it's one sound. You can actually have with your hand, with a different stick, you can do
Yeah.
So you were doing that with the low tom-tom. But, you know, for example, as you were playing that, now, everybody that is listening, imagine, so Claus is playing that rhythm, and now we have a choir of vocal people singing in African, and you go, oh my God, that's a great African song. Now, play that same rhythm and put Yngwie Malmsteen on guitar. And now it becomes, oh my God, I love that heavy metal song. So, and then you take that away and put a B3 organ with a rhythm guitar, and oh my God, he's taking a drum solo on an R&B song. So basically, rhythm is rhythm, but what you put on the top, I can play a bossa nova to If You Leave Me Now. That's a Chicago hit that it was called a pop song. But in reality, it's kind of like a bossa nova. So if you know bossa nova, you're gonna enrich your vocabulary more than just know 4 or 5 beats. Oh, this is my 12/8 beat. This is my jazz beat. This is my rock beat. This is my heavy metal beat. And I learned all these beats from a book, and I'm a drummer. So, you know, this is my 52nd year as a professional musician, and I travel. I didn't know that I was going to travel the world that much. But when I started travel the world with different artists and different bands, I didn't waste any time, because I almost risked my life sometimes to go to some neighborhoods to gather instruments. And when I was in China, I don't know if I made any money, because I remember I went to China in 1980, and they were starting to let pop music, Western pop music in, but I was not interested in that, because that's what I did. And I wanted to know Chinese drums, the gongs, how you use them. So everybody told me, oh, you got to go to a folkloric shop. Okay, what is a folkloric shop? We use those rhythms for carnival, for different things, not for radio, for songs. So basically, that's what I wanted to go. And I bought gongs, drums. And all of a sudden, I say, how am I going to bring this back? So, you know, in the traveling, I collected not only knowledge. When I was in Istanbul with Santana, I bought a bunch of Mediterranean drums, darbuka, you know, all the frame drums. And, you know, I loved to search the rhythms of that drum. And that's why it has made me a better musician, a better listener, and a better gatherer of options for the artists that hire me, whether it's Santana or I tour with Khaled from Algeria. I went to do rock with Johnny Hallyday, and I learned a lot from the African friends of mine in Paris. You know, I would finish playing Johnny Hallyday a rock concert, and then at night I was out with my Cameroonian friends and Ivory Coast, and learning. Not that I used that on Johnny Halliday's show, but it inspired me to do other kinds of music and just be a better musician, more vocabulary. If I would open up an ice cream shop, I wouldn't have vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate only. That's why Baskin and Robbins, Haagen-Dazs, many ice cream shops are successful. How many flavors do they have? They have bubble gum for the kids. They have salted caramel. They have, I don't know, inventions, conglomerations, different flavors, you know, traditional chocolate, chocolate with chips and peanuts, chocolate with this. We're a business. We're talking art and rhythm, but what are you going to do? Play at your house forever? I want to make money. I want to make money with my art. So I paint, and it's not just spending the money to paint and put it in my wall. I enjoy it, but I would like somebody to use this art to get inspired and make some money so I can eat, sleep, drink water, and do some more art. So the better you become as a historian, you don't have to be a professor in ethnomusicology, but the more you know of your instrument, the more you can search, the more you can gather. And you might hear a rhythm on percussion and come back to your drum set and play it on a drum solo. And people go, oh my God, you came up with this groove. It's amazing. It goes, well, I don't have to tell them, but it might be a rhythm from the Ivory Coast that I developed, like what you're doing right now. It's amazing. So that is not easy, but what you did. But with practice, you have to spend the time. We were talking about it before. You have to, unfortunately, it takes time, and nobody has the time to wait for time. So, but it takes time for everything. To be a good husband, a good son. I now call my dad with a different view. Dad, man, I get it. Now I know the sacrifice you did for us. So, it takes time for everything, for your drumming to develop your hands. Oh, I cannot play that because my technique is not good enough. So now you have to work on technique so you can play something that feels good. Sometimes something simple feels good, but sometimes you got to do certain polyrhythms, and the only way to do them is to practice and develop and I leave you with this. One time, Changuito from Cuba, he master timbale player, drum set, invented the songo rhythm. One time he was in a festival, I saw on a video, on a festival in Panama, and there was a guy playing timbales, and Changuito was like right there on the side stage. And the guy was playing timbales, and maybe he was nervous, and maybe he did a solo and it didn't go well. And it was like thousands of people, people were dancing and all that. And Changuito was there, and he came and whispered something to the guy like this, And so a year or two later, I saw that guy that did the timbale solo. And I go, man, I got this video of you doing this solo, and Changuito whispered something to your ear. And go, what did he say? And he told me, he said, hay que practicar. You gotta practice.
Beautiful, beautiful.
On that note, I think it's a good point to actually conclude the conversation. Well, you're the person that, for this type of podcast, we could just easily extend it for another hour or two, or just forget about the time and keep talking. And it's been amazing. Claus, thank you for the chat as well. And if you have any questions about this meeting, about any courses, or you have any ideas, or maybe any other topics you'd like to us to cover, just let us know, and we try to respond as soon as we can. That would be it from my end. Walfredo, thank you for sharing all this information. It's been great. It's been very valuable. And until the next time, hopefully.
Absolutely.
We'll do it again.
Awesome. So I'll simply end it here in 3, 2, 1, and until the next time.